The sun is just beginning to creep over the coastal hills of Ventura County, California. The light hits the rows of strawberries, turning the dew into tiny prisms of gold and red. It should be a picture of abundance, a postcard of American agriculture at its finest. But in the fields, there is a strange, heavy silence. The usual hum of voices, the rhythm of hands moving quickly against leaves, the laughter and conversation that typically fill these pre-dawn hours, it is all gone. Lisa Tate has been farming this land for 6 generations. Her family has been here since 1876, through droughts, through depressions, through every kind of disaster nature and history could throw at them. She knows these fields like she knows her own heartbeat, and right now, she is looking at something she has never seen before. The workers are gone. Not just a few. She estimates that around 70% of the workforce that should be here, that needs to be here, has simply vanished. This isn't a matter of a few missed days. In the world of agriculture, time is measured in hours, sometimes minutes. When a crop is ripe, there is no waiting. The strawberries, the bell peppers, the delicate avocados, they do not pause for politics. They do not wait for policy to catch up. They ripen, and then they rot. What happens next may surprise many, but for those inside the industry, it is a crisis that has been building for months, and it is a story that touches every single person who eats food. Before we get into the details of how the immigration crackdown is reshaping the agricultural landscape of the most productive farming state in the nation, take a moment to hit that subscribe button and make sure you never miss an update on the stories that affect your daily life. This is the kind of reporting that impacts what you pay at the grocery store, and we need your support to keep bringing it to you. Click subscribe now, and don't forget to like this video so more people can see what is happening beneath the surface of their food supply. The silence in the fields is not an accident. It is the result of a wave of enforcement actions that have sent shockwaves through immigrant communities across California. But here is where the story takes an unexpected turn. When researchers from Michigan State University and the California Farm Bureau set out to survey farmers across 50 of the state's 58 counties, they expected to find that direct enforcement actions on farms were the primary driver of labor shortages. What they discovered instead was something far more complex and, in some ways, more troubling. Less than 1% of farmers reported losing workers as a direct result of ICE raids on their own property. But about 15%, and among labor-intensive crop producers, that number jumped to 19% reported losing workers because of something far harder to quantify. Fear. This is a story about psychology as much as policy. It is about the invisible architecture of anxiety that now surrounds the agricultural economy of California. The workers are not necessarily being taken. They are choosing to disappear. They are staying home, hiding in the shadows of their own lives because they have seen what happens to those who do not. One farmer in Orange County, Mark Lopez, watched this unfold in real time. When immigration raids swept through Southern California, they did not touch his property, but the fear did. About 60% of his workforce simply stopped reporting. For 2 to 3 months, the field sat empty. The orders were placed, the markets were waiting, but the hands that were supposed to do the work were too terrified to show up. Strawberries rotted on the vine. The losses were not trivial. This is the first piece of a puzzle that is rapidly taking shape across the state. It suggests something that is only beginning to be understood, that the impact of enforcement goes far beyond the number of arrests or deportations. It is about the chilling effect, the way that fear spreads through communities like a virus, paralyzing the very systems that keep food on our tables. Now consider the numbers for a moment, because they are staggering. California grows over a third of the vegetables and more than 3/4 of the fruits and nuts in the United States. This is not just a state economy. This is the national food supply. And the backbone of that supply is a workforce that, according to the USDA, is about 70% foreign-born, with nearly half of those workers lacking legal immigration status. What happens when that workforce is afraid to work? The answer is already visible in the fields. A Mexican farm supervisor who oversees strawberry fields in Ventura County normally commands a crew of 300 workers. On a recent day, he had just 80. Another supervisor, responsible for a field that should hold 80 workers, found himself with 17. Imagine running any business with less than a quarter of your staff. Imagine that business involves a product that spoils in days. The supervisor told reporters that he watches his crops and wonders if they will be harvested before they are lost. Some believe that this is a temporary disruption, that once the immediate fear subsides, workers will return. But there is evidence that this time, something is different. A 54-year-old man has worked in American agriculture for 3 decades. He has a wife and children in this country. He has weathered every storm that has come through the fields. But he told Reuters that most of his colleagues have stopped showing up for work entirely. He says that when they leave for the fields in the morning, they do not know if they will ever see their families again. That is not the calculation of a temporary absence. That is the calculus of survival. The stories emerging from the Central Valley and beyond paint a picture of a community in survival mode. One farm worker in Riverside County told Newsweek that she is taking extraordinary precautions just to get through the day. She escorts others to medical appointments. She delivers groceries to indigenous language speakers who are too afraid to leave their homes. She has watched children witness raids near their schools, and she has seen the psychological toll it takes. Another worker, a woman in Oregon who follows the seasonal harvest between California and the Pacific Northwest, described a life of constant surveillance. She scans every unfamiliar vehicle. She checks for dark windows that might hide federal agents. She and her family recently tried to enjoy a day at a nearby waterfall, but the sight of a truck with tinted windows sent them into a spiral of panic. The truck turned out to belong to another family, but the fear was real. The fear is always real. This pervasive fear is reshaping the agricultural landscape in ways that are only beginning to be measured. The Michigan State Survey found that about 14% of farmers said they reduced production because of enforcement-related concerns. They planted fewer acres. They watched crops spoil. They made decisions not based on market conditions or weather, but on the fear that there would not be enough workers to bring the harvest in. For farmers like Lisa Tate, this is a tipping point. She told The Guardian that most farmers in her area are barely breaking even. When you lose 70% of your workforce, you do not just lose a crop. You lose the ability to pay your bills. You lose the ability to keep the farm operating. You face the very real possibility of going bust. Some believe that the solution lies in the H-2A visa program, a federal system that allows agricultural employers to bring in temporary foreign workers legally. The use of this program has tripled over the last decade, and the Trump administration has taken steps to make it cheaper and easier for employers. In October, they issued a regulation lowering the wage rate for H-2A visa holders and allowing employers to charge them for housing. But here is where the complexity deepens. The H-2A program is not a simple fix. It is, in the words of one industry advocate, incredibly bureaucratic. It involves 4 different agencies touching every single application. It is expensive, often costing employers upwards of $30 an hour when housing and transportation are factored in. And there is a deeper problem. The farmers who need workers do not just need them for a few months. They need them year-round. The H-2A program is designed for seasonal labor. It does not fit the reality of California agriculture, where crops cycle continuously, and the need for hands in the fields never really stops. What happens next may depend on forces far outside the control of the farmers or the workers. The Trump administration has shown signs of recognizing the contradiction at the heart of its policies. On his Truth Social account, the president conceded that the raids were taking very good long-time workers away from the agricultural sector, workers that are almost impossible to replace. He told reporters that farmers are being hurt badly, that the workers are not citizens but have turned out to be great. He promised to issue an order to address the impact. But as of now, no policy change has been enacted. This leaves farmers in an impossible position. They are caught between the enforcement of immigration laws and the economic reality of their own survival. They are watching their workforce evaporate not necessarily because workers are being deported, but because the fear of deportation has become so overwhelming that it has paralyzed the labor market. The economists are watching this closely. Douglas Holtz-Eakin, a Republican and former director of the Congressional Budget Office, has been blunt about the consequences. He says that an estimated 80% of farm workers are foreign-born, with nearly half in the country illegally. Losing them will cause price hikes for consumers. It will disrupt supply chains. It will damage the agricultural industry from the ground up. Bernard Yaros, lead U.S. economist at Oxford Economics, adds another layer to the analysis. He says that native-born workers tend not to fill the void left by immigrant workers who have left. They work in different occupations. They do not show up to replace the hands that have disappeared from the fields. The jobs simply go unfilled, and the crops simply go unharvested. What does this mean for the average American? It may mean higher prices at the grocery store. It may mean shortages of certain fruits and vegetables. It may mean that the supply chain that has delivered fresh produce to every corner of the country for generations begins to fray. But there is a deeper consequence that is only beginning to emerge. The farmers who are struggling to find workers are not just facing a single season of loss. They are facing a structural shift that could permanently alter the agricultural landscape of California. Consider the case of the Hmong farmers in the Central Valley. They are small-scale growers, often working 40 acres or less. They've relied on programs like the local food purchasing assistance program to help them stay afloat. That program, which generated around $10 million in sales for local farmers, is now facing cuts. The USDA funding that supported it is running out early, and farmers who depend on it are facing the prospect of going back to almost zero. This is not just about immigration enforcement. It is about the convergence of multiple pressures on the agricultural system. Labor shortages, funding cuts, rising costs, and shifting markets are all coming together at once, and the result is a level of instability that has not been seen in generations. A sixth-generation farmer like Lisa Tate has seen her family survive everything that history could throw at them. But she told reporters that this feels different. This feels like a tipping point. She sees the 70% of workers who have disappeared from the fields, and she wonders if they will ever come back. The workers themselves are asking the same question. One woman in Imperial County, working in the date palm harvests near the Mexican border, described the constant stress that has become a part of daily life. She said that people are asking field supervisors to escort them home after work for safety. She said that this is not like anything they have experienced before. During the pandemic, they were considered essential workers. Now, they are constantly scared, with reduced hours and reduced work. The irony is not lost on anyone who is paying attention. In 2020, the nation celebrated farm workers as heroes. They were the ones who kept the food supply moving when everything else shut down. They were essential. Now, they are hiding in their homes, afraid to leave, afraid to do the work that everyone agrees is essential. There is a scene playing out across California that captures this moment perfectly. In the early morning hours, before the sun has fully risen, small groups of workers gather in the shadows at the edges of fields. They are not sure if they should go in. They are watching for trucks with dark windows. They are listening for the sounds of vehicles that should not be there. They are making calculations that no worker should have to make. Is the risk of arrest worth the wages they will earn today? Is the possibility of being separated from their families worth the cost of a single day's labor? Some are choosing to stay home. Some are sending their born children to the grocery store because they are too afraid to go themselves. Some are asking neighbors to drive them to work, hoping that a familiar face in the car will be less suspicious than a lone worker walking to the fields. And the crops are waiting. They do not know about the politics or the policy debates. They do not know about the tweets or the promises of orders to come. They simply ripen, and then they rot. The Michigan State Survey found that, on average, farmers who reported labor losses said they lost roughly 17% of their workforce due to immigration enforcement-related factors. That is not a trivial number. That is the difference between a harvest that succeeds and a harvest that fails. That is the difference between a farm that survives and a farm that closes. And the farms are closing. According to the USDA Ag Census, the San Joaquin Valley is losing 5 farms a week. 5 farms every week in one of the most productive agricultural regions on Earth. What happens when those farms close? What happens when the crops that should be feeding the nation are left to rot in the fields? What happens when the workers who have been the backbone of American agriculture for generations decide that the risk is no longer worth the reward? Some believe that the system will adapt, that technology and automation will fill the gap. There is already evidence of this happening. The UC Santa Cruz study on the fast food wage mandate found that restaurants were accelerating their use of automation order kiosks, mobile apps, AI drive-through systems, specifically to reduce their labor requirements. The same forces are at work in agriculture. Robots that can pick strawberries, machines that can harvest lettuce, drones that can monitor crops. They are coming, but they are not here yet. And in the meantime, the crops need to be picked by human hands. The workers who are hiding from IC know this. They know that they are essential, even as they are treated as criminals. They know that the economy cannot function without them, even as they are driven into the shadows. One worker, a woman in Riverside County, put it simply, farm workers are hard-working people who work tirelessly. Their bodies are spent by the end of the day, and we do not have time to be criminals. We are just working to provide for our families. Her words hang in the air like the morning mist over the fields. They speak to a fundamental truth that the policy debates often miss. These are not abstract figures in a political argument. They are people. They are mothers and fathers. They are the hands that put food on the table. and they are disappearing. The White House has defended the enforcement actions, with spokeswoman Anna Kelly saying that the president will continue to strengthen the agricultural industry while keeping his promise to enforce immigration laws. The Department of Agriculture has echoed this, arguing that the immigration system has been broken for decades and that the current administration is finally enforcing the law. But in the fields of Ventura County, in the strawberry rows of Orange County, in the date palm groves of Imperial County, the reality is more complicated. The workers are not being replaced, the crops are not being harvested, and the farmers are facing the hardest decision of their lives, whether to keep fighting or to give up. Lisa Tate has been farming for 6 generations. She told reporters that she has never seen anything like this. She looks at the fields that her family has tended since 1876, and she wonders what will be left for the 7th generation. She sees the 70% of workers who have disappeared, and she knows that without them, the math does not work. She told Reuters that most farmers here are barely breaking even. She fears that this has created a tipping point where many will go bust. The tipping point. It is a phrase that appears again and again in the stories coming out of California's agricultural heartland. It suggests a moment of no return, a threshold beyond which the system cannot recover. Some believe that we are already there. Some believe that the loss of the workforce, the reduction in production, the closure of farms, all point to a fundamental restructuring of American agriculture. What does that restructuring look like? It may mean fewer farms, larger operations, more automation, less fresh produce. It may mean higher prices, fewer choices, a food system that is less resilient and more vulnerable to disruption. It may mean that the abundance that has defined American agriculture for generations becomes a thing of the past. But here is what is not being said, what is lurking just beneath the surface of all these reports and surveys and interviews. The workers who are hiding from IC are not just essential workers. They are also taxpayers. According to the Institute on Taxation and Economic Policy, undocumented immigrants in California paid nearly $8 in state and local taxes in 2022. They contribute to the economy. They are woven into the fabric of the communities where they live and work, and they are being driven out. What happens when they are gone? What happens to the schools that their children attend, the hospitals where they receive care, the economies that depend on their labor and their spending? There is a story that the official numbers do not capture. It is the story of a 32-year-old woman named Sylvia, a Mexican immigrant who has lived and worked in California for years. She told reporters that she is scared every single day. She saw her friends arrested in Oxnard, not far from where she lives and works. She has 2 daughters, both born in the United States. She lives in constant fear of being separated from them. "We are between a rock and a hard place," she said. "If we don't work, how do we pay the bills? If we go out, we risk running into them." She is not alone. There are thousands like her, living in the shadows of the fields, doing the work that keeps the food supply moving, waiting to see what happens next. They watch the news, they hear the debates, they see the agents on the roads, and they make their calculations. The sun is rising over Ventura County now. The dew is burning off the strawberries. The day is starting, whether the workers are there or not. The fields are waiting, the crops are ripening, the clock is ticking. And somewhere in the shadows, a worker is making a decision that will determine the fate of a harvest, a farm, a family. They are weighing the risks against the rewards. They are calculating the cost of going to work against the cost of staying home. They are wondering if today is the day that everything changes. Lisa Tate is waiting too. She is watching the fields that her family has farmed for 6 generations, and she is wondering if this is the end. She told reporters that she has never been this scared. She has never seen the workforce evaporate like this. She has never faced the possibility that the farm might not survive. And that is where we leave it for now. The workers are deciding, the farmers are waiting, the crops are ripening, the system is straining, and no one knows how it will all come out. The tipping point is here. What happens next may determine the future of American agriculture. What happens next may determine what you pay for food, what you find on the shelves, what kind of country we become. The fields are silent. The workers are hidden. The strawberries are waiting. And somewhere, in the spaces between policy and reality, between enforcement and economy, between fear and necessity, the story of this moment is being written. The question is, who will be left to read it?